So for the first time ever, Flash developers are going to be able to read and write local files directly inside the Flash player. So currently, the best way to do that is to actually round trip to a server. So if you want to be able to have somebody use a local file, they'll actually have to upload it to your server and then download it into your Flash movie. Well, with Flash 10, we have direct access to the user's hard drive to read and write files. And I'm going to show you that in this tutorial. Okay, so I'm going to create another sprite subclass, and I'm going to call it fileload.as. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a very simple text editor that will allow us to load in a text file from the hard drive. I'm going to modify it, and then we can save it back out to the hard drive as a text file. So I'm going to need to import a couple of packages here. I'm going to import flash.text, since we're going to be creating a text field. And then the actual file reference class is actually in flash.net. Okay, now I'm going to create my metadata that I showed you before. So this is the Swift metadata. I'm going to leave all these at the defaults. Now the first thing I'm going to do in the constructor is I just want to set up the stage a little bit. And what I'm going to do is to set the scale mode of the stage to no scale, and then the alignment of the stage to top left, just so it's going to be easier for us to see it if it's not being scaled. Okay, so now let's create our properties for our class here. The first thing I'm going to do is to create that file reference object. So I'll create a private variable. I'll call it FR for file reference. So again, this class exists currently in ActionScript 3, but it doesn't have the ability to read and save local files directly. So, and that's the new features that I'm going to be showing you here. Okay, so the next thing we need to create, is our text field. So I'm going to create another private property. I'm going to call it IT for input text, and it's going to be of type text field. Okay, so now let's go back to the constructor and we'll start setting things up. First thing I'm going to do is to create that text field. So I'm going to say IT is equal to new text field. And let's set up some properties for it. So I'm going to make it 500 pixels wide, and we'll make it 300 pixels high. Let's put a border on it. So it.border equals true. Let's make it multi-line. So it.multiline is equal to true. And let's turn it into an input text field. So it.type is equal to input. And I'm going to set it down about 30 pixels because we're going to be creating a couple of buttons that are going to go at the top of this text field. So I'm going to set its Y equal to, let's say 35. And now let's add this input text field to the display list. Okay, so now we've set up our text field. It's out there on the stage. Oops, and I have a spelling mistake here. So now what we want to do is to create a couple of buttons. One, when I click on it, it's going to open up a file dialog to allow me to load in a file, and then basically a save button that I can click when I'm ready to save. So I've actually created just a simple class called Quick Button that all it does is just create a very simple button. But again, you can use anything you want in here. So I'm going to create a couple of new instances of that. So I'm going to call it QB1, and it's of type Quick Button. It's equal to new Quick Button. And then I'm actually, to the constructor, going to pass in what I want it to say. So I'm going to say load file. And let's go ahead and add that to the display list. So QB1. And I'm just going to copy this line. We'll create another one. I'll call it QB2. And this one I'm just going to say save file. And we'll add QB2 to this playlist. So now what we want to do is to listen for the click event on these buttons. So I'm going to say qb1.add event listener, and we want mouse event dot click, and I'm going to call the function onLoad. Let's copy this, paste it down. This one's going to be onSave, not onDave, and this will be qb2. And for qb2, I want to set its x property just so it doesn't interfere. So qb.x, and I'll put it at 105. Okay, so now we have our two buttons set up. We have our text field set up. Now let's start dealing with the FileReference class. So the first thing we need to do is to instantiate it. So fr is equal to new FileReference. So again, nothing different here so far. So now what we want to do is to respond to the event.select event for this file reference. So this is going to be the thing that pops up once the user has selected a file. So I'm going to say fr.add event listener, and it's event.select. And I'm going to have it call a function called onSelect. Okay, so the other event listener that we need to listen for is the complete event. So this is actually going to fire once the file has, once we've loaded the file, and then once we load the file, we're going to be able to take the text and display it in the text field. So fr.add event listener, that's event complete, and I'll have it call a function called onComplete. Okay, so now we can start writing some of these functions. So let's start with the load file button. So I'm going to create a private function, and this is called onLoad. So what we want to do in this function is we actually want to open up a file picker so that the user can navigate on their hard drive to the file that they want to load in. So to do that, we simply say fr.browse. So this is going to open a file chooser. Again, this was here in earlier versions of the Flash player. The difference is when we select a file, we're going to load it in instead of uploading it to a server. So okay, that's all we're doing in onLoad. Next thing we want to do is to create the onComplete function, and this is going to be onComplete. Okay, so now inside of here, this is going to fire whenever we have finished loading in the file, and when that happens, we actually want to populate this text field with whatever data is in that loaded file. So let's first actually stub out the onSelect event. Let's create it here just so we go in the correct order. So this will be onSelect. Now onSelect, since the user has, so on this onLoad, we've opened up the file chooser. As soon as the user selects the file, it's going to come into this function. Now we need to actually load in that file, and this is where we have a new method of the file reference called load. And that's all we need to put, because we've already loaded which file we want. We've selected which file we want here, and now let's go ahead and actually load in that file. Now when the loading is complete, it's going to come into this onComplete function. Now inside of here, we can actually get at the bytes that are in that file and populate the text field. So it.text. And now we want to go to fr.data, which is actually a byte array of the actual file that was loaded in. And I'm simply going to do read UTF bytes, and now we pass in how many bytes we want to read, and I'm just going to pass in fr.data.length, which is basically going to read in the entire file and populate it into our text field. Okay, so that's good. Now the next thing we need to do is to respond to the on save here, or when the user clicks on the save button. So I can now edit the file in the text field. When I'm ready to save it out, I need to respond to this click event. So let's create that really quick. So private function, and it's called onSave. Okay, so inside of here, again, we're going to be using another new method of the file reference, and that's FileReference.save. So again, this is now a new method which allows us to save data directly to the hard drive instead of having a round trip to the server. So the first required parameter is what data do we want to save? And I want to save it.text. Now the Flash player is automatically going to detect that it's text content, and it's going to correctly write out text content to the file. Now the second, which is an optional parameter, is what we want the file name to be once we save it, or what's going to be populated in the save dialog. So we want to save as the same file name as what we open with. So to do that, we simply say fr.name. Now we can always change that in the save dialog. So one thing it's important to note, and this is the difference between the file I/O capabilities of Flash Player 10 and Adobe Air, is we can't programmatically write files to the hard drive without user interaction. So the only way that we can save a file to the hard drive is by popping up a save file dialog box to the user, and then they have to go ahead and initiate the actual saving of the file. Whereas in Adobe Air, we can just write files in the background anywhere on the hard drive that we want. So that's the main difference here. Okay, so let's quickly just walk through this code again. So again, I have a file reference, I have a text field. Here we're setting up the text field. I have a couple of buttons just to be able to interact with this. So I have a load file button. When that's clicked, basically we're going to open a file browser dialog, and once the user selects the file from that dialog, it's going to come in here, and we're going to actually load in the bytes from that local file into the file reference. When it's done loading, this onComplete will fire, and we're populating that text box with the actual bytes from that file. When the user wants to save the file, they click on the save button. It comes into this event handler, and now we're using a new method of the file reference called save, where we can actually save out that text to the hard drive. So fingers crossed, we shouldn't have any errors. Let's see. Okay, no errors so far. Okay, so let's open that up now, and here we can see our movie. So now here's my input text and my two buttons. So I'm going to go ahead and load in a file. So I just have a really simple text file here in the desktop. So I'm going to select it. Now we can see the contents of that file have populated the text field. And if I come in here now, I can edit this text all I want. And when I'm ready to save this file back to the hard drive, I can click Save File. And now we can see we have a Save dialog box, and it's pre-populated with the same name as the file that I read in. So I'm just going to save it to the desktop, click Save. It's asking me, do I want to replace it? Yes. And now, if I open up that file in TextMate, here we can see that local file has successfully been written to by Flash Player 10. Now it's important to note that this isn't working because I'm running it locally, and when you put this on the web, it's not going to work. This will work exactly like this, even if I was running this from a local server. So again, if you wanted to create Flash movies where you wanted the user to load in their local content, manipulate it, and save it to the hard drive, you no longer have to round trip to the server with the new capabilities in Flash Player 10.